Good day, children. So this is again a Module 2 Utilization of Assessment Data, Part 2. Last time we discussed about describing group performance. We mentioned about the measures of central tendency. So we discussed there a little bit of mean, median, mode, and then we also discussed the measures of variation or dispersion. Wherein meron tayong dalawang uri, no? We actually have absolute measures of variation. Okay, so we did mention about the range and of course its interpretation. Interquartile, no, of course, meron din siyang interpretation. We mentioned also the different properties, no? And the quartile deviation with its interpretation and standard deviation. For the absolute measures of variation, we talk about range. Yeah, no, and then the other things here, and then sa kabila we have our tabular form discussing their description, the interpretation, and then the properties, no. And then the other side, we also had some computations, no, on how to compute your range for ungrouped and grouped data. The same with your interquartile range, no, and then quartile deviation. So as with the variance and of course your standard deviation. And then right after that, we also discussed. I think the last part of it would be the relative measures of variation, no, the coefficient of variation. So meron din tayong konting computation dyan, and then binigyan natin ng emphasis yung interpretation, no? Because I did mention sa previous video natin that for this part sa lesson, we will not really focus on the computation, the mechanism of the computations, but this is more on the interpretation of the results, no? Kasi sa board exam naman, wala naman talagang computation. Ibibigay yung result and then you look for the interpretation of the result, no? Your evaluation of the result. Of course, we did mention again, no, measures of central tendency. We have measures of variation or dispersion, the absolute measures of variation, the relative measures of variation. And then today we will be discussing, we'll be talking about measures of skewness, the normal distribution, describing individual performance, and then standard scores, and of course, describing relationships. Okay, let's refresh ourselves to the learning outcomes of this part. Of course, we have to identify properties of measures of central tendency. So we're done with that. Identify the uses of the different measures of variability, compute the value, and make an analysis of range. We are done with quartile deviation, variance, and standard deviation of a given score distribution. We also had identify the properties of the different measures of variability. And then we are also done with differentiating standard deviation and coefficient of variation. So for this time, we will try to look at and apply the concept of skewness in identifying the overall performance of the students. We also have to identify the different types of standard scores, convert raw score to standard score, determine the degree of relationship of two groups of scores, compute the correlation coefficient, and the last one would be to apply the different concepts in the utilization of assessment data. Okay, so those are again our learning outcomes for the whole session for this particular video. Okay, so we will continue discussing measures of skewness. So measures of skewness describes the degree of departure of the scores from the symmetry. So our focus here is when we say symmetry, that's the between portion. Okay, so paano daw siya yung pag-depart niya, no, from the middle, no, from the middle of this of the particular curvature. So that is a measure of skewness. Okay. The skewness of a score distribution only tells about the performance of the students, but not reasons about their performance. Okay, so the skewness coefficient. Okay, the skewness coefficient or the SK can be solved using the formula. Again, Skew is a measure of symmetry in the distribution of scores. Okay, measure of symmetry. The skewness of a score distribution only tells about the performance of the students, but not reasons about their performance. So we have here the skewness coefficient, or denoted as the S, capital S and small letter k, can be solved using the formula. So that is our Sk is equal to 3, okay? X bar minus X. We also have another bar here divided by small s, where your X is the mean value and the other X here is the median value. And then S is the value of your standard deviation. Please take note that for you to get the skewness coefficient, you have to get the mean value of the data. You also have to look for the median value, and of course, you have to solve for the standard deviation. Skewness can be classified according to the skewness coefficient. So I think we have here our table. We have the first one is the positively skewed, no? And according to here, your SK, or the skewness coefficient, is greater than 0. So if SK is greater than 0, meaning to say skewed to the right siya, so this particular picture, okay, this one, skewed to the right, this means that the end, no, that the thin, sorry, that the thin end tail, so ito siya, okay? So your thin entail, okay, of the curve goes to the right part of the distribution. And of course, the right part of the distribution. So most of the scores are low, hence most students got scores below the mean value. Please take note of the interpretation or the implication. So most students got scores below the mean value. Okay. So mean value is greater than the median and the mode values. For example, perhaps we have mean natin is 50, okay, and then our median is 47, and then our mode is 43. Okay, so poor performance to the students, no, this could be attributed to the following. The first one is ineffective methods of teaching and instruction. So that's, I think, yan yung pinakaunang makikita, no? Makikita ang rason, no? We can actually use that reason, no? For us really to look for parang justification why the performance of the students are poor, no? And students are not ready to take the examination, okay, perhaps, and then test items are very difficult, okay, and then the time given to answer the test is not enough. That is why by the time we will be giving examination, we have to make sure that we have to consider the capability of our students, no? Accordingly, when we are making our exam, make sure na yung standard natin, kasi tayo yung gumagawa ng exam. Of course, for our evaluation of the exam, easy yun para sa atin. But how about the students who will be answering, no, sa exam? Okay, so those are just one of the mga reasons, no, bakit meron tayong mga tinatawag na poor performance to the students, and we're going to look at here. This will be the result of it, no, if we're going to solve for the skewness coefficient. So that's the interpretation of this figure. Okay. Next would be the negatively skewed, meaning to say the skewness coefficient is less than 0. Okay. So meaning opposite po siya, no? So skewed to the left, meaning the thin and tail of the curve goes to the left part of the distribution. Okay. So nandito po siya. So, okay, this one. Okay. So most of the scores are high, and then hence most students get scores above the mean value. Okay. So like for example, this one. So mean value now is less than the median and the mode value. So if you're going to look at the example, you can actually understand the statement. And the outstanding performance of the students, no, and the performance of the students can be attributed to the following. The first one is the group of students is intelligent. Okay? Siguro lahat ng most of the students there, ano nga section 1 siguro na siya kay mga bright man. There is enough time to finish the examination. The time element in taking the exam is very important. It's very essential. I think this is if we are lenient, if we can be lenient to the time elements of face to face, I think we also have to be lenient, no, in this time of pandemic, in this time of classroom instruction. Very easy test items probably, and then effective instruction, we can also have that, no? So ang galing talaga magturo ni teacher, yung mga ginamit ni teacher sa pagtuturo, they are all effective, no? Sum total, no, the sum total instruction of the teacher was effective. And then number five, students prepare themselves for the examination. Siguro nabigyan talaga ng tamang panahon. Siguro na-announce yun siya og layo pa. So muna ang dagkong scores ang mga bata. So that is for the negatively skewed, meaning to say the value of the skewness, the value of your skewness coefficient is lesser than uh, 0. Okay. The next one is what call the normal distribution. Now, if you are to check, and then if you go to higher discussion in statistics, normal distribution is very complicated, as we say. Okay, for normal distribution naman, no, for positive, naatay greater than zero. For negatively skewed, meron tayong lesser than zero or less than zero. For normal distribution naman is your skewness coefficient is equal to zero. I think this particular term, maririnig nyo talaga ito pag kukuha kayo ng mga ito, sa thesis ninyo. Your statistician would ask you if the distribution is normal, no, because it could actually affect, no, sa statistical tool na gagamitin ng statistician, no. So one of the considerations of looking into your data, if the data is normally distributed. Okay. So the scores are normally distributed. So actually ito yung nangyayari sa normal distribution, no? So it is symmetrical to the mean. The end tails of the curve can be extended indefinitely on both sides and asymptotic to the horizontal line. Now, when we say asymptotic, hindi talaga siya nag-touch, no? If you're to look at this part here, no? Wala yun na siya nag-touch, no? Asymptotic to the horizontal line. Okay. So it is symmetrical to the mean, no? Because you have your mean here. Okay? Symmetrical daw siya. Okay? Sige. The value of the mean, median, and mode are equal. So kung titingnan siya, that's equal. Okay. Most of the students get a score within the mean value, hence most students have average performance. About 68.26% of the students in the group have average performance. No, kung kanina sa positively skewed, ang mga scores na to dira kay low, no? So meaning to say, ang interpretation sa low ang scores, ang ilahang concentration karon sa scores ng buong klase is below the mean value. On the other hand, sa negatively skewed naman, most of the scores are high. The finding here is most of the scores are above the mean value. Now, for the case of normal distribution naman, lahat daw ng scores ay nagkukumpulan within the mean value. Okay? So if the mean value is 35, so most likely nandun yung mga close talaga siya sa value ng 35 yung scores. No? Doon nag-focus sila lahat. Okay? So that is for the normal distribution. Okay. Sige. I think we were trying to look at once again the picture. Okay. So this one we have the normal curve here, and then of course the positive direction. Okay. So we have the positive direction. This is an example of uh, I think we are to know, no, based on the example given. Okay. So the first example is we have to find the coefficient of skewness of the scores of 30 grade 4 pupils in a 45 item test in mathematics. The mean is 38.50, the median is 35.25, and the standard deviation is 250. Now we just have to input everything, no? Kaya naa naman tayo formula, input lang nato siya. Everyone, please try computing this, no? Baka meron tayong mali sa pag-compute. So the first value of x, no, the first x is 38.50, the other one is 35.25, and of course, for the standard deviation, we have 2.50. Ang swerte ng example ito kasi binigay na lahat, no? All you have to do is to plug in and then of course compute for the result. So according lang dito, no, your coefficient of skewness is equal to 3.90. Now, what's the interpretation of 3.90? Okay, so your SK is equal to 3.90, so the value is positive. Okay, so positive siya. The score distribution is positively skewed, meaning to say most of the scores are low, thus the students perform poorly in the said examination. Okay. Sige. I hope you understand the interpretation of your of the measures of skewness. What I mean is the skewness of the coefficient of skewness. Okay. Okay. Let's now proceed to the next example. Find the coefficient of skewness of scores of 30 grade 6 pupils in a 45 test item uh, in Makabayan. Okay. So, alam naman natin yung Makabayan. That's actually the equivalent of social studies. Okay. The mean is 39.50. The median is 42.50 and the standard deviation is 3.25. No? I think ito yung gagawin ko, no? Kung meron man tayong exam, I will give the value for you naman na to use the formula, and then you just have to plug in everything, and of course I reiterated that the most important part is how you interpret the result, no, right after the computation. Okay, so that is our problem, everybody, and try to look at our representation here, our figure. No, alam na natin kung ano yung magiging resulta nito. So we will just, of course, we have to emphasize, right, the given. Okay, and then we will use the formula for the skewness, the coefficient of skewness. We have 3 here, and then x minus x bar divided by s. Okay, and then right after that, that is 39.50 minus 42.5. Okay, and then the answer would be, excuse me, the answer would be 2.76. Okay, so that's the answer. You SK now for the interpretation. SK is negative 2.76. So the value is negative, no? The score distribution is negatively skewed. Therefore, no, most of the scores are above the mean. Thus, the students performed well in the said examination. Okay, so that is in the negative direction. Therefore, again, this is negatively skewed. And if you're going to go back to your what do you call this? When you go back to the table no presented later, no later. What I mean is kanina. Okay, nakita natin that when the if it is negatively skewed, therefore your coefficient of skewness is less than zero. Okay, so less than zero siya. Therefore, okay ang score. So most of the scores are high. Okay, I hope that is clear to everyone. The next one is the normal distribution. Okay, remember kanina, meron tayong na-present for the measures of skewness. We have positively skewed, we have negatively skewed, and the last one is the normal distribution. And then nakita natin kanina that the skewness or the coefficient of skewness for the normal distribution is 0. Okay, so it is symmetrical to the mean. The end tails of the curve can be extended indefinitely in both side and asymptotic to the horizontal line. So, ibig sabihin again ng asymptotic ay yung line na hindi nag-touch no, sa horizontal line. Okay. So normal distribution is a special kind of symmetric distribution, and it represents some properties in mathematics. It is very important when comparing between scores and making statistical decisions. I think I did mention this that your statistician would probably ask you. This is very common, no, sa mga statistician na magtatanong talaga sila if the nature of the data is normally distributed or not, because by the time you will answer, no, kung ano yung sagot sa tanong na yan, that's the time that the statistician can decide kung ano yung gagamiting statistical tools. Okay, ano man yung i-apply niyang treatment. Okay. It can be determined using the values of the mean and standard deviation. Please take note, we have to have the value of your mean and of course your standard deviation. You can compute your standard deviation by the value of your mean, no? So, meron siyang proseso. The smaller the value of the standard deviation, the steeper the score distribution and less dispersed. So please take note also of the interpretation, no, the mechanism of your normal distribution. So the smaller the value of the standard deviation, the steeper the score distribution and less dispersed. Okay, so yan yung parang interpretation natin when it comes to standard deviation. So let's try to look at here the properties of normal distribution. So the curve has a single peak, meaning the distribution is unimodal. It is a bell-shaped curve, no? Kung nakita natin kanina uh, sa figure natin, no? It is a bell-shaped curve. It is symmetrical to the mean, okay? The end-tails of the curve can be extended indefinitely in both sides and asymptotic to the horizontal line. The shape of the curve will depend on the value of the mean and standard deviation. The total under the curve is 1. Hence, the area of the curve in each side of the mean is 0.05. I think meron tayong picture later. The probability between two given points in the curve is equal to the area between the 2 points. Please take note of the different parts mentioned sa properties ng ating normal distribution. Please take note na ano siya, meron siyang curve, no, bell, para siyang bell. Nangyari sa bell. And then of course, yung sinasabi natin kanina na asymptotic, no, to the horizontal line, yung end tail, both end tail niya. And then nasa sa gitna, nasa gitna siya sa mean. So, ito yung mean natin. And if the the data is normally distributed, meaning the mean is equal to the median is equal to the mode. You have to take note of that also. Okay? And then please, everybody, I think it is better for you to go back to the properties of the normal distribution and try to look at the different numbers here. Okay. And you will appreciate itong mga later part na sa properties of normal distribution. Again, when you are looking into this figure, please go back to the normal distribution properties. We also have this one. And also this one. Okay. Next is describing individual performance. There are four ways of describing the individual performance of the students. In order to describe the individual performance of the students, we have to convert the raw score to standard score. Um, it's not actually a very literal, no? So we'll try to look at kung ano lang yung ibig sabihin nito. This is done by computing the z-score, the t-score, the standard or the stanine, and the percentile rank. So ito yung mga gagamitin natin for us to convert the raw score to standard score. Actual scores or raw scores are the scores directly obtained from the result of an assessment procedure. Yung mga nakukuha ninyo, like for example, nagpapa-survey kayo, yung result ng survey, no, the very the very result of the survey is what we call the actual scores or the raw scores. And those scores, they don't signify anything unless you will convert it to the standard score by, of course, using the different tools, no, for computations, no, to convert it to standard scores. Again, it did mention here that we are going to use z-score. Okay, meron tayong z-score dito. We also have t-score, the stanine, and of course, the percentile rank. Such scores cannot be interpreted whether they are low, average, or high. So ito yung again, yung sinabi ko na your the value or the numbers, no, right after you gathered your data, do not signify anything, no. So mao na nga kailangan ginato siya i-convert, no, for us really to interpret or for us to give meaning kung ano talaga yung meaning, no? And then of course, right after that, we can evaluate after. Okay. Right after we convert the raw scores to standard scores. You can check once again the normal distribution properties and use this figure. Okay. Now let's try to look at this example. John Michael obtained in a score obtain a score of 82 in business statistics and 78 in marketing management. Questions. In which subject did he perform well? Is it correct to say that JM performed well in business statistics? This may be true, but how accurate is this answer? Remember, again, na-mention natin na ito yung example na tinatawag natin na actual score or raw score. Okay? We cannot evaluate, no, we cannot actually say what is the meaning of 82 here in business statistics and what is 78 in marketing management without converting it to what we call the standard scores. Okay? So if we conclude that he is better in business statistics, then we could consider his score of 82 as a converted percentage already. So most of the time, teachers convert their student scores to percentages before they return their test papers. But that is not always the case, no? I think you knew that already. No? Nakadepende. Yung iba kay gusto nila na i-convert agad yung score to percentage, yung iba kay yung score lang talaga. So John Michael's score of 82 in business statistics may mean he correctly answered 82 items of 100 items. May mean ha, or 82 out of 82 items, or 82 out of 120 items. This may also be applied to his marketing management score of 78. He might have correctly answered 78 out of 100 items, no, the same, or 78 out of 78 items, or 78 out of 120 items. In other words, raw scores cannot be interpreted directly, so we need additional information about the scores in the distribution. So the raw scores of all students in business statistics and marketing management are very important. No, really have to look back to the whole class, kung ano yung scores nila, whatever. So because we can get information that will describe both score distributions and interpret John Michael's score accurately. From the previous discussion on the mean value and the standard deviation that we had, no? So we realized that they are necessary to describe the distribution of scores. Let us now try to present the mean values and the standard deviations of the scores of students in business statistics and marketing management as shown. Titingnan natin siguro, no, kung meron tayong pa-example dito. Okay. Again, you have to go back, no, to the different. For you to, since meron na tayong, ano ba dito, meron na tayong value, we have to go back to the mean score, no, for us to, right after no getting the raw score of John Michael, we have to get the scores of all members of the group, no, we get the mean score, and then right after that we have to solve for the standard deviation. Okay, and now that's the time that we can conclude and we can interpret kung ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng 82 na score ni John Michael. Okay, for example, kung ang raw score niya is 82, probably if we can have the group, we can check the scores of the other classmates, and then ato siyang kuhaan og mean score. Example natin yung mean score is 85. Okay? So, if malapit, no, 82 and then 85. And then let's try to look at the standard deviation. For example, the standard deviation is 3. So ang standard deviation is medyo maliit yung ang value ng standard deviation. Meaning to say, we can say, di ba, the smaller the value of your, what do you call this? The smaller the value of your standard deviation means na yung score ay medyo dool dito mismo sa ating mean value. Okay, so we can have that. So meaning, ang mga scores pala ng mga kaklase niya ay hindi masyadong kalayuan sa mean value which is your 85. Now let's proceed to the different standard scores that we can use, no, for us to interpret more the raw scores. So we have first Z-score. To get more exact information about John Michael's performance, collect the raw score and the standard deviation. Determine how far below or above the mean in standard deviation units is the obtained raw score. Okay. So binigay ko example kanina, no, katong gihatag. So ang raw score nato for business statistics, for example, for John Michael's 82, and then as atong assumption, kinuha natin yung ibang scores ng kaklase niya, and then we compute for the mean score and then we got 85. And then right after getting the mean score of the whole class, we tried to compute for the standard deviation, and the value of the standard deviation is 3. Now, based on the interpretation, ang mga scores ng mga estudyante for business statistics ay malapit lang sa mean score, which is 85. And I think that's very clear, very evident, because the score of John Michael is 82, which is near to 85. So to determine the exact position of each score in the normal distribution, we shall use the z-score formula. So nandito tayo sa tinatawag na z-score formula. The z-score is used to convert a raw score to a standard score. Okay, sorry, just a standard score, so that we can tell how far a raw score from the mean in standard deviation units or where the raw score lies. No, kung titingnan lang natin ang value ng raw score ng business statistics ni John Michael, 82, and then yung mean score na 85, we can really say na yung 82 and 85 magkalapit lang. Okay. Now for z-score here, we will try to dig more, no? Even no kung saan nag-lie daw yung raw score, no? For example, for business statistics. Okay. Now, the z-score value indicates the distance between the given raw score and the mean value in units of the standard deviation. The z value is positive when the raw score is above the mean, while the z is negative when the raw score is below the mean. Please take note of the interpretation, everybody. So this time for z value, we can actually get a positive value or a negative value, and then each of them na sila interpretation. Okay. Now let's try to look at the formula of the population z-score and the sample z-score. And of course, everybody, please take note of the different variables, no, for population and sample. Meron mga pagbabago. Okay. For the population z-score, we have to get this value, and then the other one is this value. Okay, everybody. Okay. Again, please take note of the different variables for population and sample. It's very important, no, because I think I did a lot of experience, no, sa mga inaani, no, sa during my elementary statistics. The overwhelmed ka sa pagbasa sa problem kay sa'yo na lagi, and then you computed it, and then wala na ko nasabtan di ay that the problem is a population, that the problem is sample. So sayop ang formula nga gigamit, therefore of course wrong ang answer. Okay. Okay, let's try to look at the example for business statistics and marketing management. Okay. Using the data, okay. By the way, I would like to emphasize everybody that your Z there, no, ang Z is what we call the Z value, okay? And then the X is the raw score. The S is the sample standard deviation. Please take note. The X bar is the sample mean. And then we also have here the population standard deviation. No katong medyo more nailingin. Okay. And then the mu is the population mean. Okay, please take note again. Z is the Z value, of course. X is the raw score. The S there is the sample standard deviation. And then the X bar is the sample mean. And then the circle one na merong entail sa taas, population standard deviation. And then the mu is the population mean. So the Z-score formula is very essential when we compare the performance of a student in his subjects or the performance of two students from different groups. Okay, so it can determine the exact location of the scores, whether above ba siya or below the mean. That's our main concern, di ba? Mo na ito ang i-discuss kanina. And how many standard deviation units from the mean? Because right after um, looking into the value, if it is above the mean or below the mean, we shall get kung gaano ba ka-spread ang scores in a particular group. Okay. Now let's try to look at the example, no? And then we will still use the value of business statistics and marketing management. Using the data about John Michael scores in business statistics and marketing management, compute for the Z score. Okay, so meron tayong raw score. I think ito yung na-mention ko kanina. Yung raw score natin is 82 for business statistics, 78 for marketing management. Mean score for business statistics is 85 and standard deviation for business statistics is 3. No? Ato lang i-plug in ang value sa formula. Okay? And then ang nakuha nato dire kay -1, no, for Z score for BS statistics. Sorry, business statistics. Sorry. Okay, so that is -1. We have to make sure na ma-emphasize yun nato ang iyang sign, no? Kay ano man, ang Z-score, it's all about negative and positive. So lahi ang ato interpretation, ana. So dili gyud nato na siya kalimtan. Sir, if we, for example, sir, for marketing management, no? If we run through marketing management, atong nakuha dira kay +2. Okay. Sir, di ba sir, sa math kay sa algebra, no, sa math kay kung walay positive dira, meaning +2 na siya. Bahala na, no, we really have to make sure na ma-emphasize yun ng positive sign diha. Okay? Para gyud aning part kining sa Z-score. Now, let's go to the interpretation. So, sa business statistics, for this example, ang nakuha nato is -1 and marketing management is +2. Now, the interpretation, so John Michael's score in business statistics is 1 unit standard. 1 unit standard deviation below the mean. 1 unit standard because -1. Okay. His score in marketing management is 2 units standard deviation above the mean. 2 units standard deviation above the mean. Therefore, we can conclude that JM performed better in marketing management than in business statistics. Pero kita, kung makita gali nato dito ang score nga 82 diri si John Michael, then 78 diri si John Michael sa marketing management. Moingon dayon ta nga, ay, mas bright siyag marketing, what I mean, mas bright siyag business statistics kay mas dako ang iyang business statistics. But if we are to convert the raw score a into a particular score, no, so gitawag nato na standard score, atong makit-an diri nga si John Michael di ay was actually performing well sa marketing management ng subject. Because as you can see here, your Z score has a value of +2. No, meaning ang iyang standard deviation is above the mean. 2 units pag yun ang iyang saka. Okay? Therefore again, I have to emphasize that JM performed better in marketing management than in business statistics. I hope that is clear to everyone. Okay, let's proceed to the to T-score. There are two possible values of z-score. No? Nalaman natin that is positive z if the raw score is above the mean, and negative z if the raw score is below the mean. To avoid confusion, no, to avoid confusion between the negative and the positive values, use t-score to convert raw scores. So we have another method to convert your raw score to a standard score, which is by using t-score. Okay? T-score is another type of standard score where the mean is 50 and the standard deviation is 10. Please take note that for t-score, no, kailangan natin ito muna. The mean is 50 and then the standard deviation is 10. Okay. In z-score, the mean is 0 and the standard deviation is 1. Please take note also of the difference, no? One of the differences of z-score and t-score. Again, t-score has a mean of 50, z-score has a mean of 0. Standard deviation for t-score is 10, and the standard deviation of z-score is 1. In this case, the higher the value of the t-score, the better the performance of the student is. And we have now another interpretation na said na gamiton, no? The higher the value of t-score, the better the performance of the student is. Okay. Now, to convert a raw score to t-score, okay, find first the z-score equivalent of the raw score and use the formula. Okay. So, tanaton, mo ni siya nga to gamiton nga formula. We have to use, of course, it's very clear that we have to compute first the z-score before we can compute for t-score. No? Series of computations gid siya if we have to convert it to another method. So we have here our t-score. And then remember, 10 is the standard deviation, 50 is the mean. And then we shall get the value of z. Okay? We have to get the value of z. Now, we have to use, again, the score of John Michael for business statistics and marketing management. Remember that the business statistics meron siyang z-score na -1. And then for marketing, we have +2. Now, let's try to look at the value of t-score for each subject. Okay? So we have to plug in na tay formula diri nga t-score is equal to 10z plus 50. We have to plug in the value of the z-score of business statistics, which is -1. Therefore, 10 multiplied to -1 plus 50. Therefore, we have -10 plus 50. Therefore, we got 40 here. Okay. Next, for marketing management, the z-score for marketing management is +2. We have to plug it in. So therefore, then we have 10 times 2 plus 50. Therefore, we have 20 plus 50. Therefore, the score of the t-score value is 70. Now, please take note of the interpretation for t-score. So ang giingon dito sa t-score, the higher the value of the t-score, the better the performance of the student. If we are to do away no, the positive and then the negative, no, kana positive or negative nato, kung it's confusing for you and you don't want to use that, okay, you have to convert your z-score naman to t-score. Now, ang interpretation, you have here a score of 40 for business statistics. You also have here a score of 70 for marketing management. I am referring to T-scores. Ha? And then based on the mechanism, based on the interpretation, mas nag-perform good better si John Michael sa marketing management. Because we're going to compare the value of the T-score no, for business statistics and marketing management, mas dako ang T-score sa marketing management. Okay. Therefore, John Michael performed better in marketing management than in business statistics due to a higher value of t-score, which is equal to 70. Okay, I hope that is clear. Sige. Now let's try to look at the standard 9 or the STA 9. Okay. Another type of standard score is the standard 9-point scale, which is also known as STA 9. The origin word is sta, standard, plus a 9. A STA 9 is a 9-point grading scale ranging from 1 to 9. 1 being the lowest and 9 is, of course, the highest. STA 9 grading is easier to understand than the other standard score models. Let's try to look at ganong mas sayon siya. The descriptive interpretation of STA 9 1, 2, 3 is below average. Take note. STA 9 4, 5, 6 is average, and STA 9 7, 8, 9 is above average. Now let's try to look at this figure. Okay. So ato ang 1, 2, 3 again, no? Based sa descriptive nga interpretation sa STA 9, ang ato ang 1, 2, 3 kay gitawag na to nga below average. And then atong 4, 5, 6, of course, the average, klaro, no? And then atong 7, 8, 9, mao na ang ato ang above average. So masayon daw siya. Okay. When assigning a grade using STA 9, the first thing to do is to arrange the scores of the students from lowest to highest. No? Ang pinaka-importante kay we have to get man kung asa ang mas nako, asa ang mas gamay. Okay. The lowest 4% of the group, okay, here, the lowest 4% of the group will receive a grade of 1. Nara, ato ang 1. With a description of very poor. The next 7% will receive a grade of 2 with a description of poor. 12 will receive a grade of 3, okay, take note, with below average description. 17% will receive a grade of 4 as slightly below average, take note. 20% will receive a grade of 5 as average, nagit siya sa middle na ra. Okay. 17% will receive a grade of 6, a slightly above average here. 12% will receive a grade of 7, as considerably above average. And 7% will receive a grade of 8, no? And can be described as superior. And the upper 4% here, okay, the upper 4% of the group will receive a grade of 9 and describe as very superior or the highest. Okay, so naatay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 4% sa lower, no? Naatay lowest 4%, tapos tay upper, no? Or the upper 4% na gitawag. Okay. Please remember that sa ato ang standard. Now, the table below summarizes the grading system using STA 9. Okay, it indicates the percentage of scores in each STA 9 and the corresponding description. So hindi ko siya nagawa ng table, but all you have to do is to follow through the figure. No? Anyway, klaro naman po siya. Okay. Next, no, we have here is what we call the percentile rank, and I think this is the last part of converting your raw scores to standard scores, percentile rank. Another way of converting a raw score to a standard score is the percentile rank. A percentile rank indicates a student's relative position in a group in terms of the percentage of group members. Again, in terms of the percentage of group members whose scores lie at or below a given score, according to Gronlund 1998. For example, if the raw score of Vice Ganda in a certain test was 45, which is equal to a percentile rank of 98, therefore 98% of his classmates would get a score equal to or lower than 45. Again, take note, again, kung meron daw raw score si Vice Ganda and then in a certain test was 45, hindi pa natin alam kung ilang items, no? which is equal to a percentile rank natay kita hatag diri nga percentile rank na 98. Therefore then, now we can say that 98 of his classmates would get a score equal to equal to 45 or lower than 45. This can be written as PR98, PR sub 98 is equal to 45, or percentile 98 is equal to 45. Okay, that's how we do it, no? We have here a raw score of a certain test, and then gitagaan kag percentile rank, and that's how we interpret it. Okay? Brundtland, 1998, pointed out the characteristics of percentile ranks as follows. Percentile rank describes the test performance in terms of the percentage of students having a lower score and not the percentage of items answered correctly. Having a lower score, huh? Okay. Percentile rank is always specific to a particular group. Specific to a particular group because your percentile rank, no, the value here in a particular group, nagbabago din. Percentile rank is not equally spaced on the scale. Totoo yan, no? Kasi, again, nagbabago yung value. That is, again, I think the main reason why percentile rank is not equally spaced on the scale, it is because percentile rank is always specific to a particular group. Okay, so we are now done with the percentile rank. Let's proceed to the describing relationships, which is, I think, yung last part na ng presentation. So for the describing relationships, we have positive correlation and negative correlation. And then, of course, we don't forget the zero correlation. There are two ways of describing the relationships of the scores of the students in two or more subjects using the correlation of coefficient and the graphical representation of the scores in the distribution. Okay. You have to get them, no? Now, when we say correlation, it refers to the extent to which the distribution are linearly related to or associated between the two variables. No, kung unsay relatedness sa duha, kumbaga, no, kung unsay relationship of the two variables or the relationships of the two variables specifically. The extent of correlation is indicated numerically by the coefficient of correlation or the R sub xy. The correlation coefficient or the R x sub y, R sub x sub y, no, is also x sub y. Sorry, R no sub xy. Sorry, is also known as the Pearson correlation. The Pearson product moment correlation coefficient in honor of Pearson, who developed the said formula. I think this is very, this particular topic is very um, important, not necessary for those na ay mga thesis proposal diha nga they wanted to correlate the relationship of the two variables. Like for example, the academic performance, no, of the student and then the teaching strategy nga gigamit or the motivation at some point, the motivation of the student to the academic performance. Okay, so let's try to so that's it, no? This is actually very interesting. This I love, no? Na I really love this part sa statistics. Okay, anyway, the correlation, the correlation coefficient ranges from -1 to +1. So diha ra gyud ta, no? And then of course, may bala na din nato kung sa interpretation of positive ug -1. So at least wala tay daghang hunahon, no? It's only -1 and +1. There are three kinds of correlation based on correlation coefficient. We have positive correlation, we have negative correlation, and zero correlation. There are two ways of identifying the correlation between the two variables, no? Using the formula and then using the scatter plot or the scatter graph. So atong tan-awon ko unsa na sila. So we will start with the positive correlation. According to here, positive correlation now. No? So high scores in distribution X are associated with high scores in distribution Y. Low scores in distribution X are associated with low scores in distribution Y. Meaning, ang Y mo taas, and then ang Y po mo taas. It's positive correlation. When the X variable kay moubos, ang Y variable po moubos po siya. That is still positive correlation. No? This means that as the value of X increases, the value of Y increases too, or as the value of X decreases, the Y value also decreases. We have here an example. No? Tingnan natin yung nasa table. We have students 1 to 9, and then meron tayong score sa mathematics, and then meron tayong score sa science. And then ang gusto nating malaman dito, no, for example, no, nagpa-survey tayo, na kumuha tayo ng data, no, kinuha natin yung scores nila, gusto nating malaman kung meron bang relationship ang score ng mathematics ng estudyante and then the science scores nila. Okay? And then kung titingnan natin dito, no, kung titingnan natin yung scores nila, we can actually get na yung mathematics score, no, kung nagkataas ay iyang score diri, no, 3, 5, no, we have 5, 4, we have 6, 7, no, tanaw nato na siya, nagka-increase yun ang ilahang score, sorry. It should be 3, 2, 5, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, 14, we have 17, we have 16, we have 20, we have 21, 22, and then we have 25. Okay. If we are to get the scatter plot, kung naka-scatter plot na siya, narana. Okay. Okay. Pakitingnan yung formation ako, i-connect natin itong mga dots na ito. Okay. Some point, ganyan siya. Okay? So as math scores increase, there is a corresponding increase in the science scores. Using the given points in the coordinate plane, a straight line upward to the right, no, ito, a straight line, a straight line, okay, upward to the right can be drawn that is best fitted to all points. Hence, the slope of the line is positive. And this is an example of a positive correlation. I hope you get it. Next we have is the negative correlation. And let's try to look at generate alam yun nato no ang scores sa estudyante 1 to 8, ilang mathematics scores and then ang ilang English scores. Okay? So that's our negative correlation. Let's try to look at the scatter plot. So kung ato siyang i-connect ang mga lines diri, this will be the picture of it. Paana siya. Okay? Atong himuag laing linya, paana. Okay. So as math scores increase, English scores decrease. Using the given points in the coordinate plane, a straight line downward to the right can be drawn that is best fitted to all points. Hence, the slope of the line is negative. Okay. Therefore, this is an example of a negative correlation. So high scores in distribution X are associated with low scores in distribution Y. Low scores in distribution X are associated with high scores in distribution Y. So this means that as the value of X increases, the value of Y decreases. So meron tayong opposite na formation sa value natin, and that is an example of negative correlation. Next example is, or next type of correlation we have is the zero correlation. Tingnan na naman natin tong score ng TLE and then the PEB score. Yan yung score natin. Okay? Now, when we say zero correlation, it means that there is no association between the scores in distribution X and distribution Y. No? For this example, makaingon gyud ta nga walay relationship ang score sa TLE ug sa ilang PEM. No? Most likely, we can argue that TLE is a different field And then PEM is very different, no? Very different. No? Unlike sa math and science, because they most likely we can argue also na sa math and science, they what you call this, they complement with each other. And most of the time, yung science kasi natin, ang language na ginagamit ay mathematics, no? So mao nang naagid sila close kaayo nga association, no? Ang duha ka subjects. Okay. For TLE scores, no, tanaw na to siya. Okay, if we are to get the scattergram, no, in ani ang iyang dagway, no, wala gyud siya proper linya. Never siya kung imong i-connect ang mga dots. We cannot actually form like this, okay? And we cannot also form like this. No, wala. Okay? Most likely katag jud kaayo siya, no? Meaning, no discernible pattern can be formed from the given set of points. No single line can be drawn that is best fitted to all points in the plane. And this is what we call the zero correlation. Meaning, walay relationship ang duha ka buok scores nato. Walay relationship ang score sa bata sa TLE and then sa PEM. Okay? And I think that is clear to everybody. And I hope that's clear. And that's the end of discussion. Thank you so much, everybody. If you have questions, you go back to this one. I think the presentation naman is medyo klaro naman. And anyway, I will send the presentation to ginamit ko, no, along with the this video. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. God bless and keep safe always.